What was it like living in a village? What was that like?
It, I mean, very different from from our experience, and mine, like living in cities in the U.S. But uh, yeah, it's something you get used to, I think, fairly quickly. With Peace Corps, they start you with a training where you live with a family, and so you have that.
Hey, all right. So I am now on the line with a Miss Ashley Kent, who is the director at District Zouk, which is the leading source of Brazilian Zouk in the Washington D.C. area. You started that. I believe you and a group of friends started that back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's
Hey,
correct.
hey, awesome. You also are involved with Swouk Zouk, which hosts Zouk and West Coast Swing monthly parties in the DC area. Is that correct as well?
That is correct.
That's awesome. That's we'll talk about that. Done that before. Um, so you were born and raised in California in the Bay Area, and you are a Brazilian Zouk dancer, instructor, as well as an organizer. Is that correct?
Hmm.
Hey, so how are you doing today, Miss Ash?
Doing great.
That's awesome to hear. That's awesome to hear. So I guess I'd like to start this interview. I'm very curious to hear about your childhood growing up in California. What was that like for you?
Uh, it was great. I grew up dancing different kinds of solo dance, tap, jazz, ballet. So that's been a big part of my life from when I was little, and I stuck with it uh, through college, and obviously beyond. Uh, I've always really enjoyed the arts in general. So dance, music, theater, um, and uh, I, I then continued with all of them really in college, and beyond. So I have degrees in theater and dance, as well as arts management, um, which has helped me obviously in building a community and dance organization here in DC.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So you say you've been dancing since your childhood. What got you into dancing at such an early age?
Uh, my parents really, they were uh, supportive from the beginning.
Okay. And so let me ask you this then. So yeah, what did your parents do, man, if I may ask?
Nothing related to the arts. Neither of them are dancers, but they took us, me and my brother, to performances from when we were young. Uh, and uh, to classes like the dance classes that I started in when I was little.
Okay, okay, sure enough, sure enough. Let me ask you this then. So growing up in California, how important was music in your household growing up?
Uh, that's an interesting question. Not that important actually. Um, I grew up going to church, and so most of the music in my house was Christian music, but it wasn't that prevalent. There wasn't music playing all the time. Um, but we did, of course, sing in church, and I also sang in choirs at school and at church.
Okay, okay, sure enough. I definitely understand that. Um, so I guess what were some of your childhood hobbies then? Was it strictly were you strictly like, arts minded or in your dancing, or what were some of your hobbies as a child?
Uh, I mean, I read a lot, and I've always had sort of split interests in arts and math, which is what I double majored in college as well. But I do math clubs or camps or logic puzzles and that kind of thing in my spare
Okay.
time.
Okay, so you actually enjoyed math though, which is quite impressive.
I
So
do.
uh so
Yeah.
so you're growing up in California, you're growing up dancing and everything. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you got older, if you understand my question?
No, I don't think I had a clear goal or idea in mind in terms of that.
But you knew something with arts then, or what? Or something with arts or math then? Is that what it was?
Yeah, as far as I can remember.
Okay, sure enough, sure enough. So I'm curious then, what happens after you graduate high school and you go off to college, or I guess what happens after high school?
Yeah, I went to college in Southern California, and I specifically chose a liberal arts school where I could study math and uh, theater and dance. So, uh, and that's what I did. I double majored in math and theater with a minor in dance. Uh, so I was very busy all the time.
So you
Uh,
a double major, definitely, of course.
um, and in theater, I was involved in stage management. So even actually before I went to college, I worked part time with a professional theater, doing different backstage roles. Um, so I started that when I was in high school, and then continue with it in college.
Okay, and I guess throughout your young life, are you continuing to dance? Are you still doing tap, jazz, and did you say ballet? I don't know if you said ballet at all. But were you still dancing,
Yeah.
the whole time?
Yeah, so I mean the one thing about it is I sort of dabbled in those different styles. So uh I sort of feel like by doing a little bit of each of them, I got a good foundation, but I didn't become that good at any one of them, if that makes sense. So like I wish that I had done ballet consistently growing up, but I didn't. I did it here and there, and so it's helped me, but I'm not great at it. And that's sort of how I've continued even beyond. So I still, on occasion, go to uh, tap classes or ballet classes, but not that consistently these days either.
Now I understand. I definitely understand that. So I'm curious. You said you go to your college and you start double majoring. I guess tell me about I guess tell me about your time there. What was that experience like for you going to that university?
It I mean, it was a great experience. I I went to a small liberal arts school, so and it was part of the Claremont colleges. I went to Pomona College, um, so there were a lot of opportunities, both within my college and the adjacent colleges. Uh, yeah, and my time was pretty filled up with taking uh, theater classes, math classes, and dance classes. And then I was also involved in the student theater organization. So I produced um, student theater shows as well as participating in the ones that were part of the college program.
So was your goal at that time to become some, big and famous actress or what?
No, I was a stage manager, so I took acting classes as part of the requirements, but my role was primarily um, organizing. So as a stage manager, you help run rehearsals and sort of manage the actors and the technical aspects of the show. Uh, so that's something I'd really enjoyed.
Okay,
Uh,
and so I'm pretty sure you were probably the first stage manager I've ever met. So please tell me real quick, what made you enjoy this so much? I'm very curious to know. Like, yeah, why was that so fun for you?
so it's cool to see all of those different pieces come together. So and to be a part of facilitating that. Um, I mean I enjoy the sort of administrative aspects of coordinating schedules and that sort of thing, but also then with a show, you are uh, helping sort of usher along the technical readiness, for example, checking in with the director to see if how they're doing on finishing the set for the show, and then also with the actors after each rehearsal, making sure that uh, everything is progressing as planned. And then for the actual performances themselves, it's very cool to be in that role. So, uh, I mean, things can go wrong, and then you have to help handle that. But in general, if things are going right, then you're on a headset during the show, calling cues to tell the other technical folks, when lights should go on or off, or various things like that. So uh, it's a lot of fun to call a cue and then all the lights go on or they go off or whatever it might be, um, and uh, and then to be a big part of making all those pieces come together.
I definitely understand that. I guess it's not something that you really think about, but yeah, when you see like a player or something, there's definitely somebody who is calling the shots, right? Trying to make sure everything's run proper.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't trying to be an actress, was your goal to be, in Hollywood or on Broadway, being a stage manager? Was that your goal at that time?
uh, I thought about it, and um, I hadn't. I mean, I hadn't decided at that point. I was just doing different things that I enjoyed. But I decided sort of partway through college that I didn't want to pursue theater as a career, for a couple different reasons. But it is something that I still enjoyed. But career wise, it's challenging because in most cases uh, you each job is just for a couple months, and then you have to find another one. And you rely very heavily on building a network so you can try to get consistent employment. Um, and I'm actually more of an introvert, and so that aspect of that particular career was a little bit uh, daunting and undesirable.
Yeah, okay, I definitely understand. So,
And I mean, I separately also decided that in in most professional theater settings, um, apart from that sort of logistical aspect of that career, you are it. It's really a career focused on entertainment, and I wanted to pursue something of that was more clearly of direct benefit um, to people in society. So I mean, I do very much believe in the value of theater um, in a variety of different ways, but I was looking for a different opportunity that allowed me to more directly impact people's lives.
No, I understand that. I definitely understand that. So
Hey kid, come here. Hey, if you could leave a like and subscribe, that would be amazing for the channel. Let's get back to the show.
so so I guess I'm very curious then. Are you, I guess during college, are you still, every so often taking dance classes, or had you kind of dropped that hobby at that time?
Yeah, no, I had a minor in dance in college, so I was still taking dance classes all the way through college. Um, I uh, took a variety of different types, but I took some ballet, some modern dance, and then I actually in college studied abroad in Ghana for a semester to study theater and dance. Um, and I went there having never done any African dance before. But I mean, since going there, then I've continued to do African dance. Uh, so that was a big part of my life throughout college as well.
Okay. Well, I have to ask you, I'm very curious, what was Ghana like? What was that experience like when you got to visit?
It was a great experience. I was at the University of Ghana, right outside Accra, and the the dance classes and theater rehearsals were very different than anything I had experienced before. Um, we did a production of The Lion King uh, at the University of Ghana. I choreographed it with two Ghanaian friends uh, and did an internship at the National Theater of Ghana um, in downtown Accra. So it, yeah, it was nothing like anything I had experienced before, and a lot of fun.
Now, now was this before you went to Malawi, Africa, or after?
It was before
Okay, okay. So, okay, that's awesome. So I'll definitely talk about Malawi as well. But how long were you in Ghana for?
4 months, one semester.
Okay, okay, one semester. And so, um, I guess how I guess how did that impact you? Like, being able to visit Ghana, did that impact your dancing style at all? I guess learning to like be there, being in that culture.
Yeah, I mean, I was learning traditional Ghanaian dances, and they're very, very different than any dancing I had done otherwise previously, and and I enjoyed that a lot. Uh,
I'll say
so
yeah, going from California to Africa, it's probably two very different cultures, places, everything.
yes, yeah, um, yeah. No, I mean, I really enjoyed. I had always enjoyed traveling and seeing other countries and cultures, but this was my first time in Africa, and I had very much wanted to be at a school with students from that country. That was part of why I chose that particular program. There's um, a lot of programs in Africa or even other places have sort of a group of Americans that are all together, and uh, they might travel around. But but I wanted to be at a university with students from that country. So that's what I did in Ghana there. And that was actually when I was introduced to partner dancing. Was when I was studying in Ghana. Some of my Ghanaian friends took me to a salsa class. They actually had it, it. They had a salsa night twice a week in Accra with a class, and then social dancing. So we went regularly while I was there.
That's so cool. That's really cool. I've interviewed some salsa dancers from Ghana, and so I definitely that's really cool though that you were actually able, you were introduced to salsa in Africa. That's really cool. um, Real quick, I don't know if you remember this. So going back to your beginner stage in salsa, what was it like learning salsa at that time?
I remember it being a lot of fun. They one sort of unique thing that they did there that I actually haven't seen it anywhere since is they would do sort of salsa line dances. So in addition to normal partner dancing, um, they during the social as well as during the class, someone would lead a kind of line dance, and it was actually a nice way to get everybody up and involved because sometimes during social dancing, people end up sitting on the side, especially if they're or leaders or followers. Um, but and then it's also practicing steps or patterns that you use in the dance itself. And it would usually be a pattern that would repeat. So um, one, people who'd been coming there for a while would get to know the particular um, dances that they would do. But then also, even if you didn't, then you would pick up some patterns and catch on. Um, so that was something that I enjoyed there and haven't seen anyone do anywhere else.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've never heard of a salsa line dance. I'm trying to picture that, but all right, that is very different. You're right. um, so yeah, so you go to Ghana, you visit, and then you come back. Um, and so do you pursue any other partner dances, or are you kind of just like was that a one-time thing for you?
I didn't pursue any partner dances when I came back at that time. So that was 2003 that I was in Ghana. I think I went salsa dancing once with a friend a few months after, but other than that, I just stuck with African dance and then dances I'd been doing previously, so modern dance and ballet and and some tap dancing also. I think, but then I didn't get back into salsa dancing until much later. Uh, it's it's nice to have some familiarity with it. So, for example, when I was in Malawi, uh, there were a couple times where I ended up somewhere where there was salsa music playing and found someone who could salsa dance and ended up dancing a little bit. But I didn't um, start doing salsa or other partner dancing regularly until I came to DC in 2009.
Okay, and so what year did you graduate from your university?
2005.
Okay, I get you. And so are there any other international trips that you took after Ghana?
So after I really enjoyed my time in Ghana, so that got me interested in serving in the Peace Corps to go back to Africa. And I did that when I finished college and went to Malawi for 2 years as a teacher. And I taught secondary school math there.
So yeah, Malawi is a eastern country or country in East Africa, I mean.
Yeah, it's Southeast Africa, between Mozambique and Tanzania and Zambia.
And so yeah, please speak on it. What was Malawi like? I've never been, so I'm very curious to know.
um, it is a very friendly country. Uh, it's sort of highly populated for as compared to some of the surrounding countries. but also fairly poor. Um, I was living in a village in northern Malawi, and I'm trying to think where to even begin. But it's as a result of the colonial influence. There are some arts there, but it's nothing like Ghana. In Ghana, uh, the culture is very vibrant, so um, in all kinds of ways. So art and clothes are colorful. There's music playing everywhere. People dance and sing all the time, and so that was something that I really liked about my experience in Ghana. In Malawi, uh, while there is music and there's some dance, it's much more focused around sort of church activities. The British colonial influence is is much more prevalent. Uh, so so there's not as much sort of color around in both a literal and a figurative sense. But people are very friendly, and and I enjoyed the experience very much. Uh, I taught secondary school math primarily, but also life skills and physical education and other things like that.
That's awesome. I'm very curious to hear, what was it like living in a village? What was that like?
It, I mean, very different from from our experience, mine like living in cities in the U.S. But uh, yeah, it's something you get used to, I think, fairly quickly. With Peace Corps, they start you with a training where you live with a family, and so you have that experience before you go off on your own. And then, in my case, I was living at a house provided by the school, so I was on school grounds basically. So the commute was like walking out your door and across the fields, and you were at the school. But I lived in a sort of brick and cement house. When I arrived, I didn't have electricity, um, but we got it about 6 months into my service. Uh, but only at that time, certain buildings. So the school had electricity, for example, but most of our students did not have electricity at home. So they would sometimes come to the school buildings to study at night because they could use the lights there to save from having to use gas lamps or candles. Uh,
That's crazy as well.
yep,
And so going. How old were you at that time?
I was 23, I think.
23. Yeah, so going 23 years of your life with electricity. What was it like to go 6 months without it?
um, I- it was, I mean, it was fine. I had plenty of alternatives. So I had candles, I had a gas lamp. Um, so yeah, you just get used to uh, using those all the time. Um, and uh, like in my case, there was a store walking distance away that had a generator, so I could go there to charge my cell phone, and just leave it there to charge and then pick it up later. Um, but uh, yeah, something you get used to, I'd say.
Okay. Okay. And so you still got, I guess, cell phone signal, like cell phone reception?
Hmm.
Okay. Okay, that's awesome. Okay, that's something there. And so and
But
so
this
and
was
so tell me about.
so I don't know what it would be like now with smartphones. seems like it's probably very different.
Okay, okay, I understand you. I get you. tell me, tell me, what was it like being a teacher in Malawi? What was that experience like for you, and what did you learn from it?
Um, Good question. So it was uh, it was a challenge for sure. So most students grow up speaking a Malawian language or multiple Malawian languages, and secondary school is the first time that they're having all of their classes taught in English. So not only is math challenging or whichever subject matter they're learning, but they're now having to um, try to understand it in English, which is their second or third language. Um, and classes are very large as compared to the US, at least. So my Form 1 class, which is like our ninth grade, had about 65 students. And they're different. Familiarity with English varies, and of course with mathematics as well. Um, I also struggled some with the curriculum, or I felt that they did, because in Malawi and I understand that this is a way that some schools do this in the U.S. as well, but they um, use a variety of different. They mix in different concepts throughout the year. So rather than one year being focused on algebra, another year on geometry or that sort of thing, you'll have 1 week on algebra and then another week on geometry and then another week on statistics. And so it's hard to sort of tie all of those together. So that I found to be somewhat challenging. But we, of course, had the range of some students who were really interested and trying hard, and some who were really not very interested or not trying very hard. Um,
I said a class of
so,
65, of course.
yep. Um, yeah, so lots of practice with classroom management and uh, and that sort of thing.
That's intense. That's like trying to calm down a stadium or something. That's crazy. And let alone teach them something that that you're trying to teach. I'm curious. How long were you in Malawi then?
For 2 years, basically.
Okay, that's a long time. You definitely lived there. That's pretty cool. So you were there for 2 years. Looking back on it, in your opinion, what are some things that you think they could have done better while you were there?
Uh, it's hard to say. It was a long time ago now, but I think, I mean, in general, the school system in Malawi is sort of tiered from fairly early on. So there are different sort of levels of schooling, not in terms of age, but in terms of kind of skill. So students are tested at various points, and then placed into schools based on how they do on those tests. So the students who do better on the tests get into the better schools that are funded better. So then that means the students that struggled more get into the lower level schools that are not funded as well. Um, and the Peace Corps volunteers, at least at that time, like myself, were placed in this lower tier of schools because that's where they needed more help. Um, so it's then a combination of students who already struggled more than some of their counterparts, and in most cases were less well off. which then posed challenges with getting school supplies and that kind of thing. So the result is that they struggle more, through the remainder of school as well, and very few of them are able to get to university or the next level of schooling, which of course also requires them to test very well at the end of secondary school.
That sounds like kind of like a terrible cycle. That's kind of unfortunately started young or started early on.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you this real quick. I'm very curious to hear. So coming from California to Malawi, is there anything that you learned from living in that type of poverty? Is there anything that you like learned from it, or anything you experienced that you took away from that?
Yeah, I learned a lot, and it's hard to sort of boil it down into one or a couple of things. I think uh, for most Peace Corps volunteers, you learn a lot about another country and culture. You also learn a lot about yourself, uh, living on your own, um, in a very different culture and place. So I think uh, to just sort of name a few things. I don't know if these were like the key lessons, because again, it was a long time ago. I would say uh, I gained an appreciation for how different uh, people's lives can be in another country and in a different part of the world, and that um, the sort of Western or North American way is not the only way or necessarily the best way of doing things or living life. Uh, so that was nice to sort of become familiar with a very different way of living.
I definitely understand that. I definitely do. Being exposed to different cultures, man, that can have quite an impact on you. So I definitely understand that. And so you visit Malawi, and then I guess you come back to the States. Where do you come back to after you're done with your trip in Malawi?
I came back and went to graduate school in Pittsburgh. They have a Peace Corps Fellows program. Um, there are a variety of different universities that have that, where they provide some financial assistance for people who have been Peace Corps volunteers. So I did that program at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, uh, which also meant there were a number of other Peace Corps volunteers in the program, from who had served in different countries around the world. So that was also nice to be in this program with other people who'd had somewhat similar experiences in different parts of the world.
I definitely. And real quick, so going back to Malawi and Pittsburgh, are you still pursuing dance at all?
Not really. So in Malawi, I mean, there was no dance in my village. Really, I mean, the students would occasionally dance, um, or at on certain holidays. There were certain traditional dances that people would do. Now in Malawi, they were almost all either men's dances or women's dances. There, I did not, I don't remember seeing any dances that had men and women dancing together. um, but uh, we did put on a summer school for some of the students from our different schools who were uh, doing well. And at that summer school, um, I and another American Peace Corps volunteer taught a square dancing class. So we taught some of the Malawian kids some square dances. um, but that was really the extent of it at the time, with the exception of occasional, uh, like an occasional salsa dance with somebody who I met in the capital when we were out in the city, which was not very often. But then when I went back to when I went to Pittsburgh, I took African dance classes at Carnegie Mellon, um, just for fun, like once a week, that sort of thing. Um, so I did get back into African dance there.
So it sounds like you're a big fan of the African dancing. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So so yes, you go to graduate school, and is it there from Pittsburgh that you moved to DC?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yep.
and so what brought you to DC, Washington DC?
So I had a number of friends uh, who uh, who came to DC or already lived in DC. My graduate program was at a school of public policy and management, so there were a lot of people studying public policy, and many of them got government jobs after. Um, and one of my best friends um, my from my undergraduate studies had been living in DC, so I had visited her over the years. I actually uh, found my current job through a listserv for returned Peace Corps volunteers. Um, so I wasn't searching for a government job at all, actually, but they had posted this position, which is what I ended up applying for. And I didn't. So I said I came from Pittsburgh to DC, which is somewhat true, but I in the interim worked in Sudan for 6 months in between. So coming out of grad school, I got a position with the United Nations Development Program as a United Nations volunteer. And while waiting for my visa to come through for Sudan, I spent about 3 months in DC, since I uh, couldn't leave
Travel.
until I got
Exactly.
my
Yeah, yeah.
visa. Um, and I came then because I had friends in the area. So during those 3 months, um, I uh, I would go salsa dancing on the weekends because it was something fun that I could do by myself. I mean, I could go by myself, and then I could always have a good time. Um, so it was sort of fun and exercise in a way, and uh, and it was inexpensive because uh, the places I would go, usually free entry for women, which was nice. Um, so since I was between jobs, and then I was, looking for inexpensive ways to exercise and have fun. So I got a little bit back into salsa dancing at that time, but then actually more into it when I went to Sudan. So
Well,
uh,
yeah, I gotta ask you, yeah, what was Sudan like? Please speak on it.
it so it was also an extremely interesting experience that I really enjoyed. I was living there in the capital in Khartoum, so it was urban and uh, very different culturally also than my previous experiences in Africa. Um, very conservative, but in different ways than Malawi. So as a Muslim country, there were no bars and no public dancing, um, and so activities like salsa dancing had to happen in private spaces. So there there was an Egyptian cultural club where they had a salsa night once a week, um, and uh, so there were a variety of different sort of arts and culture kinds of activities that were offered through embassies or through international cultural organizations. But otherwise, I mean, people were very friendly there as well, in my experience. But there were limitations, so it wasn't safe to sort of travel or go out at night on your own, that kind of thing.
Okay, I definitely understand that. How long were you in the Sudan for?
I was there for about 5 months.
Okay, sure enough. So you kind of got like a little taste of it. I wanted to ask you this about Malawi, but I'll ask you this about Sudan. Um, what was your day-to-day life like in Sudan?
I was working at one of the government ministries there, so um, I would go into work each day. In most cases, they had a government driver who would pick me up just for safety reasons as well as convenience. And I was working with um, mostly women, actually, in this particular ministry. It was called the Ministry of International Cooperation, and I worked with them on various sort of office skills. So teaching them how to organize files on their computers and how to give presentations, and uh, and then supporting some of the ongoing work that they were doing to organize international aid. Um, but then um, in the evenings, I would get together with friends, or um, they had sometimes um, concerts or other uh, similar activities put on usually by embassies. Um, so I met people primarily through um, the international community there, since there were a lot of uh, NGOs and other government organizations. Um, so either through organized activities or just through friends, got to know uh, other people in the area, and then met friends also through this weekly salsa night that I mentioned, and then through that ended up getting together more regularly with some of them. So we had once a week when they offered this salsa night at the Egyptian Coptic club, but then we would sometimes meet on other nights to practice together in somebody's apartment.
Okay, that's pretty cool. That's really cool that yeah, apparently they dance salsa all across Africa. That's what it sounds like.
Yep.
That's really cool. So yeah, so you're living in Sudan, and you're working, you're dancing a little bit. I guess, do you have any memorable experiences from living in Sudan? Anything that sticks out in your mind to this day?
Uh, not like one specific experience, I'd say. I mean, I had a lot of interesting experiences. I went to see Sufi dancing in Khartoum, um, and uh, I went on a field visit with the World Food Program, um, which was one of the few times I was able to travel outside of Khartoum. Um, but there was one uh, night then on that field visit where I was in a village where they turned off all of the electricity at 10 p.m. But I was still on my computer on the internet, um, because we had sort of mobile internet at that time. So this was again before smartphones, really, and so it was just cool to experience sort of smaller cities and village life, in different parts of Sudan, um, and also to stay connected with friends both there and internationally.
That's really cool. I definitely understand that. So yeah, so you're in Sudan for 5 months, and then after that, when you're done there, do you return back to DC?
Yeah, I was able to travel some uh, in each of my times in Africa. Not actually so much when I was in Ghana, but um, I I traveled to Ethiopia, Egypt, Kenya, before coming back. Uh, but then um, moved back to DC for the job that I have now. They actually interviewed me right before I left for Sudan and then offered me the job while I was there. So when I finished that contract, I moved to DC, to start my current government job.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. That's really cool. So yeah, so you move to DC, and is it at that point that you get introduced to Brazilian Zouk, or like when does that come about?
That's a little bit later. So um, I when I moved back, I danced salsa more regularly. I was doing a work study with a dance school in DC called Dance Place, and they offer African dance classes, but also modern dance and salsa classes. Uh, in There's a group called the DC Casaneros who offers classes there.
Yeah,
In
definitely, I've had them on the show.
Oh, nice. Um, yeah, so I did that work study initially because it allowed me to take um, African and modern classes, but then I also took their Cuban salsa classes as well. So then I got more into regularly dancing salsa and learning, um, via classes and learning proper technique. Um, and then attended some dance festivals, since I was getting more into those dances. And so I was introduced to Zouk at a dance festival in 2012. So a few years after moving to DC.
Well, see, so real quick, so yeah, you move, so you live in Sudan, you travel a little bit. When did you move back to DC for the second time?
In
2000.
2000,
Say, I'm sorry, say it again. I didn't hear you.
2010.
Okay, 2010. Okay, I got you. Um, and so from 2010 to 2012, you're just strictly focused on salsa.
Salsa and to some extent Kizomba. So I had been introduced to Kizomba a little bit while I was in Sudan, actually, through a friend who had lived in Mozambique. So he had learned Pasada, which is
The
similar
walking.
to Kizomba, um, and danced it a bit with me. So then I sought out Kizomba classes when they started in DC, because that dance was sort of starting out at that time. Um, and so I was dancing salsa and then some kizomba, and uh, went to a few different dance festivals. One of the biggest ones, DCBX, is every year in August in DC, and they have classes in salsa and kizomba as well as Brazilian Zouk. So I was introduced to Zouk there, first just watching people social dance it, because they have in the socials a room for each of the dances. So I was able to sort of wander in and just um, see what it looks like, and then take classes the next day. Uh, and with a lot of influence from modern dance, which has been incorporated into Brazilian Zouk, then um, that looked very interesting and appealing to me from when I first saw it.
Okay. I'm very curious to hear. Do you remember who your instructors were for salsa and kizomba back in 2010?
So for salsa, the DC Casaneros, like I was mentioning, and then for kizomba, I started with Oscar BA. He's a Kenyan man who teaches kizomba in the area.
I said, I think he still teaches, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep, he's
Yeah, I've
one
been
of
to one
our.
of his socials. I'm trying to get him on the show. Yeah, yeah, all right, yeah, that's awesome. I know Oscar. I met him before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, okay. And I'm very curious, because Kizumba is probably my favorite dance currently. So I'm very curious. What was it like learning Kizumba for one in Sudan, and two, what was your beginner stage like in DC?
Uh, so in Sudan, it was like it was really just me dancing it with a friend of mine. There was no sort of formal instruction or like I didn't know any other dances except this one friend. So it was just something fun to try out. Um, in DC when I started, it was challenging for sure because uh, the way that you connect with your partner and really with the floor and the way that you step is very different than what I was otherwise exposed to. So I, for example, specifically remember when Oscar corrected me to tell me that I should put my heels on the floor and roll all the way through my feet because that's something you never really do in salsa. So that was very different from the start, but getting that sense of groundedness, which is sort of characteristic of most African dances, um, it is part of what makes that dance a lot of fun.
Definitely, yeah, I really enjoy Kizomba. Um, so yeah, so you're doing a little bit of sauce, you're doing a little bit of Kizomba, and then you go to the BCX and you get introduced to Brazilian Zouk. If you can remember, going back to that time period, do you remember what you thought about Brazilian Zouk? Do you remember your opinion on it at that time?
Um, I, so I remember being sort of entranced by the flow of it, and feeling even from the start like I was enjoying dancing it, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But from I didn't feel like I didn't know what I was doing. um, so it has a nice flow to it, and it felt like modern dance to me, um, even though it's different. And there are steps you have to learn and rules and everything else. But even right away after taking a few workshops, I really enjoyed dancing it.
Okay, okay, I definitely understand that. And so you get introduced to it at B6. That was 2012, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you get introduced there. Are you instantly hooked? Like, are you from there just taking classes as much as you can?
So there weren't any classes to take. So I was sort of instantly hooked, I guess you could say, but there wasn't there weren't any classes in DC at that time. There had been previously, but before I was introduced to Zouk. So in like 2010, 2011, there was an instructor who had been teaching it.
Do you
Uh,
know his name? Do you remember the
yeah,
name?
he Adrian Atoro Lopez. Um, at the time, he went by Adrian. He's since changed to go by Atoro. Um, and he taught with Amy White. Uh, they were on a salsa team together, and he taught her some Brazilian Zouk, and they taught classes together in DC. So there are dancers who I know who started with them at that time. But then Adrian was moving away, and they stopped teaching classes. So by the time that I was introduced to it, there weren't any classes offered. However, there was a a guy who was temporarily living in DC who danced Brazilian Zouk named Mike Fabricant. He was introduced to Zouk in Thailand back in 2007, I think, and then went to Brazil and Argentina to study it further. So he really enjoys it, and while between different contracts in different countries, he's a computer programmer and would work all over the place. He would come back to DC and visit his mom, who lives here. So he was here at the time between contracts, living with his mom, and would offer sort of free classes in the park on Sundays. But he doesn't or didn't consider himself an instructor. It might have changed now as more time has passed, but he just wanted people to dance with, and so he would just offer to teach something to whoever would show up. And so that's how I started. After the festival, I would go and learn something from him on Sundays. And we did that outside most Sundays until the weather got cold. And then I offered my apartment, and we would meet at my apartment instead. So that's really how the Zouk community, this generation of the Zouk community, started in DC. Was getting together once a week to practice, and once we started doing that, while Mike was still around, he would teach something, and then we would just practice after. But then when he left, which was early in 2013, I think, for some sort of international contract, I don't remember where, then we would still get together, and I was still learning myself. I was new to the dance, but we had some instructional DVDs, so we would sometimes watch one of those together, or I would watch it in advance and then try to teach it to other people, or find another lesson online, and it was open to anyone, no cost. So people would invite their friends, and we did that, for about I don't know, 6 or 7 months probably.
That's really cool, and it seems like I could tell how much you really wanted to learn it, because you kind of are self-taught, which probably has its problems and benefits, but you were actually attempting to, you really wanted to learn this, by seeking out the information. Definitely, I definitely understand that. That's really cool. So you're dancing, you're trying to learn it and everything. How big do you think the Brazilian Zouk scene was, in that early 2013? How many people do you think were coming out at that time?
So we would regularly have just like 8 or 10 people. I would sometimes have as many as 20 people when I would have a get together on a Friday in my apartment. But it also helped that by having something in somebody's house, then people could more easily invite their friends who might otherwise never have heard of this, or even have any interest in dance. So when there were 20 people, it doesn't mean that these are 20 people who all danced Brazilian Zouk. It was just 20 people who showed up. yeah, so that was how we started at that time, and uh, then what actually helped to grow the community was in 2013. Uh, we participated in the International Zouk Flash Mob. So
I've done that
this,
before as well.
yeah, um, yeah. So there were uh, two or three other people actually who organized it. I wasn't involved in organizing it, um, but they would hold practices in public spaces twice a week. I believe for a lot of that time. Um, so they were really trying to make it accessible to everyone. Because they'd sometimes have practices in DC, sometimes in Virginia. And since they were in a public space, people would wander by and like see what was happening and ask questions. Um, so there were a number of people who were introduced to Zouk by just jumping into those practices with the Zouk flash mob. Um, so that was something that helped get more people involved and interested in Brazilian Zouk in 2013. And then and we continued the practices in my apartment then once it moved towards the winter. Uh, so the combination of, doing some of that in public spaces so people got introduced, and then keeping regular practices going, I think was really key because I found that, if you learn something at a workshop or at a festival, but then you have nowhere to practice it, then you just forget it. But at
Exactly.
least
Yeah.
every Wednesday they can show up and practice some Zouk. Um, then it helped people retain what they learned.
No, definitely. Yeah. The space and the ability to practice is so important to becoming a better dancer. So that was so helpful for people at that time. So so you're kind of cultivating this scene in your own sense, in your own right. Um, so from 2013 to, I guess, I guess 14 is when you created the 14 is when you created the District Zouk. So what happens between 13 and 14? You do the flash mob and you're just giving classes still, just trying to improve yourself.
Yeah. So we'd get together to practice. After the flash mob, a group of us got together and discussed how can we sort of maintain the momentum that we had from that, because that was a couple months where a lot of new people got introduced to the dance, and different people had gotten involved. And so at that time, Sammy, who now organizes the DC Zouk Festival.
Yeah, I've had
Uh,
him on the scene, on the show. Cool guy.
nice. Yeah. So he was introduced to Zouk through the flash mob. He just, wandered upon one of the practices. And so he was part of this meeting after the flash mob. Um, and he decided that he wanted to start a festival. Um, and that was what he wanted to do to sort of keep things going. Um, I and some of the others weren't so interested in that, and were more interested in um, consistent opportunities to learn and practice, sort of along the same theme that I've been mentioning. Because in my mind, that's really how you build a community, and that's how you maintain what people have learned. Uh, so initially, I did that through just keeping weekly practices going at my apartment. Um, but then I reached out to Amy White, who had been Adrian's partner back in 2011. And she still lived in the area. She wasn't teaching Zouk at the time, but she did still teach some dance. So I asked her if she would be open to teaching some Zouk classes and I would organize them. Um, so we did an initial 6-week series with her. Uh, And then a few months later, um, founded District Zouk and began weekly classes at the studio where we now teach in DuPont Circle. So we've
Okay,
been
that's
doing
awesome.
that
That's
regularly, like almost 5.5 years now.
okay. Regular weekly classes.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's really good. I guess going back to 2014 when you first created District Zouk. W- Actually, real quick, what time is your class or your appointment?
11 o'clock.
Okay, how much time do you have then? What time do you need to leave? Right now?
No, I'm good till like 10:45.
All right. Oh man, I've got so many more questions for you. Okay. Um, so we'll just have to continue this another time. Okay, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So going back to when you first created um District Zoo, what was that I guess that initial stage, that beginner stage that when you first created, what was that time period like for you?
Uh, so it was nice to move things into a dance studio setting because um then it's really open to everyone. Although my apartment was sort of open to everyone, it required kind of knowing about it already versus, people just looking up, you know, uh, dance studios and being able to learn this dance. Um, it was nice to be able to offer it regularly. Even from the start, when we did the 6 week series that I mentioned, we had two different levels because I wanted from the start for people to have an opportunity for progression. So there were some people who had already been practicing Zouk by coming to my practices or coming to some festivals. Um, and then, of course, always people who were brand new. So we offered drop-in classes from the beginning because I always wanted people to be able to begin at any time. Um, so if you saw Zouk for the first time and were interested, you could come the next Monday. Um, and yeah, so it's cool to see people getting interested, getting involved, and then coming. Um, and the classes were somewhat small at the beginning, but we had regular attendance. We didn't know, if people would show up. And the studio that we worked with um, has a sort of cost share arrangement, so that was nice as well. That there was no um, there was no sort of fear of losing a lot of money because if no one showed up, then we didn't owe them anything. So that was helpful also. But we did have regular attendance, uh, and yeah, I'd say it was great to see people learning and practicing.
That's awesome. I was gonna ask you something. Shucks. Um, how were you learning and progressing in your dance at that time?
So I mean, I was taking these classes as well. I was definitely still learning at the
So
time.
what was Miss White the instructor then, or
Yes, yeah,
okay, okay,
yeah. Amy was teaching. I would assist sometimes, and I had attended some festivals by that time. So uh, the first one I went to was, I think, in June of 2014. I went to Zouk in Toronto, uh, and so I would learn um, through festivals and occasional private lessons, either with Amy or with out of town instructors when possible, and then also through these regular classes that we were then offering.
okay. Let me ask you one last question, and then we'll wrap this up and save this for part two. Um, Looking back, so you've been doing this for the past, 5.5 years now, close to pretty much six almost. Um, Kind of like a two-part question for you. First part being, um, what are some things that you know now that you wish you had known back in 2014? And I guess like the second part being, could you phrase it in a way for someone who wants to create their own Brazilian zoo community in their city? What kind of advice for that person?
That's a very loaded question. I think I think it's hard to boil it down to just one thing. But
It doesn't have to be just one thing, but okay, yeah, some things.
yeah, yeah. I'd say it's totally possible to build a community even as you're learning yourself. I think that that's something that is daunting for people, but as long as you approach it with the right attitude, so being honest and humble about where you are with your own dance journey, then I think it's very possible. So like when people would come, for example, to the practices that I would hold, uh, I wasn't putting myself out there as an expert instructor or anything. I would just, sort of share something that I knew or something I'd learned in a recent workshop or something like that. Um, and we were all learning together, practicing together. Uh, so uh, that's I think um, something that is possible anywhere because some people who live in places where like you know not the big cities in the US, basically, like places where there isn't regular zoo construction or a community yet, worry about being able to start something up or get people to regularly come. Uh, Things that were really helpful to me going to that Zoukex festival. Uh, they had a sort of lunch and learn that was just a discussion about different community experiences. So people shared about what it was like building a community in their city, things that had worked, things that hadn't worked. So that was super helpful to hear about um, different community organizers' experiences or teachers' experiences, um, and to be encouraged sort of by other people who'd gone through that same thing. And now there's a lot more structure around curriculum. Um, and if that existed at the time, I just wasn't aware of it or privy to it. I think with Zouk being a pretty new dance in the world, uh, there is still not a lot of sort of agreement internationally about the right way to teach certain things or the right progression in teaching certain things. Um, so now there are more resources in terms of trainings and just lists of techniques that didn't exist for us back when we started. So I think that's a great resource as well for people, whether they're learning on their own or whether they're trying to teach, um, to be able to structure their teaching or learning. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but those were the thoughts that came to mind.
No, I get you. That's perfect. That's perfect. I would say, isn't there? What's your opinion on? I believe it's called the Zouk Council. Isn't that what it's called, or isn't that a thing?
Brazilian Zouk Dance Council. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah. I know that's a thing. I've definitely heard of it. I've actually had Cadu Perez. Have you heard of him?
Hmm.
Okay, I've
Yeah.
had him
But
on the show. I know he's a part of that as well. But
hmm
so I do. I didn't know what you're speaking of about that. Um, so I'm gonna be honest with you, Miss Kent. I've got a lot more questions for you. I hope that's not a problem. But I know you have a class and everything, so I'm hoping that maybe we can schedule another day to finish this interview up.
yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah, I wasn't. Normally it doesn't last as long, but I kind of wanted to hear about your trips to Africa. I was very curious about all that.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think in the next interview, we'll stick definitely to just Brazilian Zouk and your experience in the DC area and everything. But I really want to thank you for taking time out your day to talk to me. I really, really do appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, I
Thanks.
will. Oh, of course. Thank you so much. I will get in contact with you, I guess, after your class, and hopefully we can schedule another day and time to pick this up again. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
I really do appreciate it. Actually, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Take it easy.
That's all it is. Hey everyone, if you made it this far to all the way to the end of the video, I want to thank you so much. Um, my overall goal with making these interviews and these episodes is to give a voice to dancers, to give them a platform to speak their story. So if this is of value to anyone, then that means the world to me. My overall goal is to give value to the dance community. So if you find no value in this, then I urge you to please let me know where I can improve on. I truly want to, just give value and content to the dance community. So please let me know how I can improve, where I'm messing up, because to be 100% honest with you, I'm learning along the way as I do this. I truly am. So to be able to interact with the dance community, it means the world to me, because it gives me feedback and it lets me know what I'm doing right, where I can improve upon, what I'm doing wrong, which I feel like might maybe more important. So please, if you all could comment and just let me know what you think, it means the world to me, because that feedback just helps me improve. So please comment as well. Please like and subscribe. That means a lot as well. But I want to say thank you so much for just watching this, because it means the world to me. I want to take you on this journey of the Two Left Feet podcast. I'm very excited for it. So once again, thank you so much.